Don't worry about the money. Your sister will handle it. She never says no to family. The words sliced through the gap beneath my parents' bedroom door like smoke, curling around my ankles, paralyzing me mid-step. I stood frozen in the upstairs corridor, my hand suspended inches from the wood, knuckles ready to announce my arrival with 3 polite knocks. Inside my purse, folded into a crisp white envelope, sat a check for $18,000. My quarterly performance bonus. After 6 years of double shifts, covering holidays, mentoring new hires through their first codes, I'd finally been promoted to senior clinical coordinator. The number felt unreal, the kind of unreal that makes you check your bank balance 3 times before you believe it. I'd driven straight from the hospital to share the news, to celebrate, to maybe, just maybe, hear my father say he was proud. I never made it through the door. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt like the family ATM, stay with me. This is about what happens when you finally check your own balance. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story of how I stopped funding other people's dreams and started building my own. My father's voice drifted through again, smooth and reassuring in that certified financial planner tone he used when discussing portfolio adjustments and liquidity solutions. Marcus will be fine. We'll get Sarah to cover the $70,000. She's always been the generous one. $70,000. My brother Marcus responded with that lazy, entitled laugh I'd heard my entire life. The sound of someone who'd never questioned whether the safety net would hold. You guys are miracle workers. Your sister's the miracle worker? My mother chimed in, her voice bright with the kind of manufactured warmth she used at her book club. She just loves feeling needed, doesn't she? They all laughed then. Not nervous laughter. Not apologetic laughter. The comfortable, conspiratorial laughter of people who just solved a problem they'd never actually have to face themselves. My hand dropped to my side. I turned around and walked back down the carpeted stairs I'd climbed 1,000 times, past the family photos where my smile grew progressively tighter over the years, past the living room where I'd studied for my nursing boards while Marcus played video games, past the kitchen where I'd learned that helping out meant writing checks. The November air hit my face like a baptism. I got into my Honda, set the envelope on the passenger seat, and stared at it like it might explain something fundamental about the universe. Then I drove home to my apartment. The modest one-bedroom in Riverside I could have upgraded years ago if I hadn't been subsidizing everyone else's upgrades. And I did something I hadn't done since my first patient died on my watch. I cried until my throat burned and my eyes swelled, and my cat, Pepper, pressed her worried face against my knee. I cried for 14-year-old Sarah, who'd used her babysitting money to buy her own school supplies because Marcus needed new basketball shoes for tryouts. I cried for 21-year-old Sarah, who'd taken out extra student loans because there wasn't room in the family budget. Not for her, never for her. Even though somehow Marcus's fraternity dues got paid every semester. I cried for every version of myself who'd believed that being the responsible one meant being the rich one, the available one, the one who'd sacrifice her own oxygen mask to make sure everyone else could breathe. Then I stopped crying. I washed my face. And I felt something click into place behind my ribs, something cold and bright and final. The next morning, I was waiting outside Riverside Credit Union when the doors unlocked at 9. The banker who helped me, a meticulous woman named Patricia who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, listened to my requests with the careful neutrality of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out before. I need to open completely new accounts, I said, sliding my list across her desk. New checking, new savings, new passwords. I need to remove my mother as an authorized user. She's been on my account since I was 22. I need alerts set up for any access attempts. And I need it done in a way that can't be undone without my physical presence and 2 forms of ID. Patricia didn't ask questions. She just nodded and typed. An hour later, I walked out with new account numbers, new cards, and the distinct sensation that I'd just changed the locks on my entire life. Next, I went to see the person who understands numbers the way I understand heart rhythms. David Chen's office is all glass and clean lines, the kind of space that makes you feel like financial decisions should be simple and elegant. He'd been my investment advisor for 4 years, ever since I'd started taking my retirement seriously, and realized that compound interest was either your best friend or your biggest regret. I handed him the bonus check, then slid across a second document, a spreadsheet titled Family Financial Contributions 2019 to 2024. David's eyebrows climbed as he scrolled. Jesus, Sarah. Roof repair after the storm, 14,000. Property taxes on the cabin, 52,000 over 3 years. Mom's dental implants, 9,000. Marcus's business loan that became a gift, 12,000. The security deposit when Marcus lost his lease. The car insurance premiums. The emergency vet bill for their dog. The temporary help that became permanent. Every transaction documented. Every date recorded. Every promise to pay back that had evaporated like morning fog. The opportunity cost alone. David did the calculation in his head and grimaced. If you'd invested this instead. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. I need documentation. Professional documentation. Not for a lawsuit. I don't want to sue them. I just need to know on paper exactly what I gave. I need to see it clearly enough that I never forget. He referred me to an associate, a forensic accountant named Leonard who had kind eyes and the patience of a bomb disposal technician. Over the next 2 weeks, Leonard transformed my careful notes into something irrefutable. Notarized summaries, highlighted bank statements, a timeline that looked like a medical chart tracking a chronic condition. The numbers told a story my heart had been too guilty to read. I had given them the down payment on a house. I had given them a new car. I had given them my 20s. That night, I called Priya, my best friend since nursing school, who has never once let me lie to myself. They've been conditioning you since you were a kid, she said flatly when I finished telling her everything. Classic golden child, scapegoat dynamic. Marcus got permission to fail. You got assigned the role of family savior, and they've been playing you like a slot machine. Put in guilt, pull the lever, money comes out. I heard them laughing, Priya. My voice cracked. They were laughing. I know, babe. Her voice went soft. And I know you love them. But love isn't supposed to come with an invoice. Come stay with me this week. We'll meal prep, watch trash TV, and write you some scripts for when they start the guilt campaign, because they will. She meant therapy scripts, which turned out to be better armor than I ever imagined. Dr. Evelyn Park had a waiting room full of plants and a voice that could talk you off a ledge or into facing one, depending on what you needed. She listened to my story with the focused attention of someone who'd heard 1,000 variations and knew exactly which patterns to highlight. You were assigned a role, she said. Caretaker. Fixer. The reliable one. Your brother was assigned the opposite, the one who gets cared for. Your parents reinforced these roles every single time you complied. Now, when you change the script, they'll escalate. Expect guilt. Expect anger. Expect them to recruit other family members. Expect the word family to be weaponized. What do I say? I asked, and hated how small my voice sounded. You don't explain. You don't justify. You don't defend. Dr. Park leaned forward. You say, I'm not available for that conversation. You say, I've made my decision. You say, I love you, and this boundary isn't negotiable. Then you end the call. And then you text me if your hands start shaking. Sunday dinner arrived like it always did. An immovable object in the family calendar, as reliable as the sunrise. I showed up with a $12 bottle of wine instead of the $40 Merlot my father hoarded in the basement and complimented at length. My mother hugged me too long, her hands patting my back in that searching way people touch you when they're looking for cracks. We missed you at Tuesday's dinner, she said, her smile bright and accusatory. Everything okay at the hospital? Busy week, I said neutrally. Marcus arrived 30 minutes late in a leather jacket that cost more than my monthly car payment, trailing cologne and confidence. He kissed Mom's cheek, ignored me, and dropped into his chair like a prince returning to his throne. So, I've got incredible news, he announced before we'd even passed the salad. An investment opportunity. Ground floor. Crypto-based but legitimate, regulated, SEC compliant, the whole thing. I took a bite of bread. Chewed. Swallowed. Tell me more. He launched into the pitch. Next Gen Digital Holdings, blockchain integration, guaranteed returns, minimal risk, and I listened with the same calm focus I used when a patient's family insisted their loved one didn't need intubation despite an oxygen saturation of 78. The minimum buy-in is 75,000, Marcus said, looking directly at me for the first time all evening. But for family, they're flexible. We could pool resources. The table went silent in that specific way silence happens when everyone's holding their breath. Mom recovered first, her voice taking on that aggressively cheerful tone she used when redirecting uncomfortable conversations. Marcus, maybe we should discuss this another time. Why? I asked. It sounds like you've already discussed it. My father cleared his throat. Sarah, that's not fair. What's not fair, I said quietly, is planning to manipulate me into giving you $75,000. What's not fair is standing outside your bedroom door with good news and hearing you strategize about how to guilt me into funding Marcus's latest disaster. Marcus's face went from tan to red. Excuse me? Last Thursday, 7:15 p.m. I came to tell you about my promotion. I heard everything. I looked at each of them in turn. Dad suggested you pitch it as a medical emergency. Mom thought an investment opportunity would work better. You all agreed that guilt was the most reliable lever. My father's mouth opened and closed. My mother's hand flew to her chest. Marcus leaned back in his chair, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across his face that looked almost like fear. I've moved my accounts, I continued. I've documented every dollar I've given you for the past 5 years. I've removed Mom as an authorized user. I've set up alerts. And I've decided something. I'm not your emergency fund anymore. After everything we've done for you. My father started. Name one thing. My voice didn't rise. Name one thing you did for me that you didn't do 3 times over for Marcus. The silence that followed was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. I love you, I said, and I meant it the way you love people who gave you life and also taught you exactly what not to tolerate. But I'm done being the person you call when you need money. If you want a relationship with me that isn't transactional, I'm here. If that's not possible, I'll survive. I stood up, put my napkin on my plate, and walked to the door. Sarah, wait. My mother called. I'm not available for this conversation, I said without turning around. Don't call me about money again. They called anyway, within an hour. Then my Aunt Lillian called. Then my cousin Brianna. Then my grandmother, who I hadn't spoken to in 8 months. The choir sang the same song. Family, loyalty. How could you? Don't you care? Who do you think you are? Dr. Park's scripts held like stitches. I hear that you're upset. This decision isn't up for debate. I'm not available for that conversation. Repeat. End call. Breathe. On Wednesday, my supervisor, a warm, no-nonsense nurse manager named Kelsey, called me into her office with careful eyes. Your father called the hospital, she said gently. He expressed concerns about your mental stability, given some recent, impulsive financial decisions. Heat flooded my face. He called your work? He did. I told him we don't discuss employees' personal lives and that if he had concerns about your well-being, he should speak to you directly. Kelsey folded her hands. But off the record, are you okay? I'm in therapy, I said. I'm setting boundaries with my family. They don't like it. Good, Kelsey said firmly. The fact that you're setting boundaries means you're healthier than most people I know. Take a personal day if you need it. And Sarah? We've seen this before. The people who get mad at your boundaries are the ones who benefited from you having none. On Friday, my cousin Jade, who worked as a loan officer at Riverside Bank and possessed more discretion than the rest of the family combined, called during her lunch break. I probably shouldn't tell you this, she whispered, but they took out a second mortgage 4 months ago. $78,000. I think it's gone. My stomach dropped. Gone where? I don't know. But your dad's been making minimum payments and Marcus's name was on the application as a co-borrower. Do with that what you will. So the plan had never been get Sarah to invest. It had been get Sarah to refill the hole Marcus already dug. On Saturday, my father called a family meeting, which apparently included Aunt Lillian, Uncle Joe, Grandma, and Marcus's girlfriend Chelsea, who I'd met twice. I didn't go, but my cousin Jade did, and she called me afterward, breathless. Your Uncle Joe stood up and said if you've been paying the cabin taxes for 3 years, you owned equity. Your aunt printed out your documentation and dropped it on the table. Your dad tried to call you ungrateful, and Grandma told him to shut up. Shut up, Sarah. I've never heard her say that, and said at least one grandchild learned how to say no. What did Marcus do? I asked. He left. Just walked out. Chelsea stayed, though. She asked your mom for my number because she has questions about financial compatibility. I laughed until I cried, and it felt like lancing a wound. 2 weeks later, my phone lit up with a text from someone I hadn't expected. My younger sister Emma, who'd always been the neutral one, the peacemaker, the one who stayed small to avoid the crossfire. I used my inheritance from Grandpa to pay off the cabin taxes. I filed paperwork for a deed amendment. You own 28%. I told Dad to split the remaining equity correctly, or I'd hire a lawyer. He's meeting with David Chun on Monday. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Not because I needed the cabin or the money, but because somewhere in the wreckage, my sister had chosen truth over peace. I texted back, "Thank you. I love you. You didn't have to do this." Her response came immediately. "Yes, I did. I'm tired of watching them eat you alive." That weekend, I drove 3 hours north to the cabin, let myself in with a key I'd had since I was 16, and painted the guest bedroom a ridiculous shade of coral that Mom would have hated. I slept with the windows open while the lake made sounds that felt like forgiveness. 6 months later, spring turned the city soft and green. I became Director of Clinical Operations, a title that meant fewer bedside emergencies and more system building, more mentorship, more power to change the structures that had broken so many of us during the worst years of healthcare. I hung a framed print in my office that said "Boundaries are love in action," and watched nurses tear up in front of it because someone had finally said it out loud. My apartment became mine in a way it never had before. I painted the kitchen yellow. I bought real art instead of prints. I adopted a second cat, named her Olive, and laughed when she and Pepper fought over the sunniest windowsill. I joined a hiking group and discovered that learning to trust your footing on uncertain ground is excellent practice for trusting yourself in an uncertain family. The calls tapered off. The group texts turned benign, weather updates, recipe exchanges, photos of Aunt Lillian's new puppy. I skipped Thanksgiving and hosted Friendsgiving instead, and cried over mashed potatoes when someone complimented my cooking without asking what it cost me. 3 days later, Aunt Lillian sent me a photo of my parents at a smaller table with fewer chairs and a caption that said, "Next year, new traditions." In November, my father had a heart attack. Not catastrophic, one stent, 2 nights in observation, but enough to remind him that bodies keep score even when we don't. I found out from Jade, not from him. I stood in the hospital corridor, a different hospital, not mine, and felt the old instinct rise up. Fix this. Solve this. Save him. Then I felt the new instinct, the one Dr. Park and I had built together. You can show up without showing up broke. I walked into his room. He looked smaller in the hospital gown, without his wallet and his watch and his authority. "Sarah," he said, and his voice cracked. "You came?" "Of course I did," I said. We sat in silence for a while. Eventually he said, "The cardiologist says stress is a factor. Financial stress." He told me about the second mortgage I already knew about. He told me about the retirement withdrawals. He told me about the investment scheme Marcus had convinced him was guaranteed. He told me, slowly and like it hurt, that Marcus had moved to Denver without a forwarding address and a phone number that went to voicemail. "Your mother thinks he'll come back," Dad said. "I don't know if I want him to." He looked at me then with eyes that had aged a decade. "I was wrong," he said. "Not we. I taught you that love means paying. I taught Marcus that love means taking. And I didn't realize what I'd built until I heard you walk away. It wasn't everything. It didn't undo the laughter in the hallway or the years of exploitation. But it was the first true thing he'd offered that didn't come with an invoice attached. "I can't fix your finances," I said. "And I can't fix Marcus. I can only show up as your daughter, not your solution." "I know," he said. I didn't ask you here for anything except to say I'm sorry. Mom arrived 20 minutes later in yesterday's makeup and a coat that smelled like lavender. She hugged me hard, then asked, gently, almost shyly, if I still had the name of the physical therapist who'd helped her after her knee surgery. I'll text it to you, I said. But I'm not co-signing anything or opening my wallet, if that's why you're asking. It's not, she interrupted. I don't know who else to ask. We burned a lot of bridges. She sat down beside Dad's bed, and for the first time in my memory, she looked small. We're selling the cabin, she said. The equity will cover the mortgage and give us a cushion. Emma already agreed. We wanted you to know. I nodded. Okay. Okay. She blinked. That's it. That's it, I said. It's your decision. I'm glad you're making one. We sold the cabin in January. It felt less like losing something and more like releasing a weight I'd been carrying without permission. We sat in a lawyer's office with stale coffee and two bright lights. The proceeds got divided according to the amended deed. Mom and Dad got 60%. Emma got 12. I got 28. My father set up an account with a fiduciary financial planner who sent me quarterly reports I didn't ask for, but appreciated anyway. He started going to a financial therapy group. He texted me screenshots of his budget like they were report cards. Paid off the credit card. One text said, "Therapist says small wins matter." They do, I wrote back. Proud of you. Emma called me from a co-working space with exposed brick and big dreams. I got into the startup accelerator, she said. I have a mentor who isn't a man who calls me for rent money. She'd split the trust fund like she promised. Dad had protested. Mom had cried. Emma had stood firm. No more, she told them. Figured out yourselves. She stopped being the pretty backdrop in other people's stories. She got a business license and a logo and a therapist who taught her that anger could be fuel if you refined it correctly. We started having coffee every Sunday. We argued about branding and website fonts and how much honesty was too much honesty on social media. It was the best relationship we'd ever had. In March, I met my father for lunch at a diner that smelled like coffee and second chances. He stood when I arrived, a small gesture I noticed and filed away. How's work? He asked. Good. We launched a mentorship pipeline that's actually working. 3 nurses promoted last quarter. We built schedules that don't destroy people. It feels like building something sustainable instead of just surviving. He nodded like I was teaching him a language he should have learned years ago. Your mother started volunteering at the literacy center, he said. She actually likes it. I think she spent 40 years doing things she thought she was supposed to do. We all did, I said. Do you think, he paused, rearranged his napkin. Would you consider coming back to Sunday dinners? No expectations. No one asks what you drive or what you make. If Marcus calls, I send him to a counselor, not a checkbook. That last part's hard, I said. That last part's love, he said quietly. I looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who'd built a house of cards and watched it collapse and was now trying to build something with a foundation. I'll think about it, I said. On my terms. I stay as long as I want. I leave when I need to. And if anyone mentions money, I'm gone. Deal, he said. Spring came early. The city shook off winter like a coat that no longer fit. I laced up my running shoes and hit the trail that winds along the river, where the air smells like thawed earth and possibility. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom with a photo of a lopsided cake and a caption. Tried a new recipe. I think I overbaked it. Miss you. Miss you too, I wrote. Baking is chemistry, set a timer next time. Come Sunday? She wrote, then quickly added no pressure. I stared at the screen, felt the old fear like a shadow, then felt the new thing, the door in my chest that only I controlled. Yes, I typed. I'll bring salad. I'm leaving by 8. No financial conversations. 3 disappeared, reappeared. We don't do those anymore. The emoji felt like she'd learned how to speak a new language. Sunday, I stood on their porch again. Same blue house. Same geraniums in the window boxes. Different person in my skin. I was about to knock when I heard my father's voice. Softer than I'd heard it in years. Let's make sure we give Emma the contractor's number. She shouldn't be climbing on that roof alone. Sarah will lecture all of us about safety, Mom said, warmth in her voice like sunlight through glass. She should, Dad said. She's the smart one. The doorbell camera blinked its red eye at me. I knocked. Mom opened the door with flour on her hands and tears in her eyes and didn't step aside until she'd squeezed my arm and whispered, "I'm glad you're here." I set the salad on the counter, took a breath, felt my boundaries settle around me like good armor. Dinner was simple: pasta, garlic bread, salad that I'd made with the good olive oil I'd stopped feeling guilty about buying. The conversation stayed present tense. When Dad started to say, "Remember when?" I said gently, "I'd rather talk about now," and he nodded and asked about my week instead. After dinner, I put on my coat, kissed Mom's cheek, told Dad to text me his cardiologist's name so I could check his credentials and outcomes like a daughter who happened to be a nurse and a guardian of her own peace. He smiled. "I already told him you'd vet him. He said to tell you he's published in 3 major journals and his 5-year survival rates are above the 92nd percentile." "Then I'll only lecture you a little about sodium," I said. "I'll take it," he said. On my drive home, the city looked like a place worth protecting. I parked outside my building, went upstairs, and logged into my investment account. My future climbed in steady, beautiful green lines. I smiled at the graph like it was a friend who'd been there all along. Then I stood at the window and thought about the woman who'd walked away from a door rather than knock, and the woman who'd knock tonight because she decided the terms. Some debts you don't pay in dollars. You pay them by refusing to believe you owe them. And some families you don't lose. You redefine them until they fit the person you've become. The next morning, I stuck a note on my bathroom mirror in purple ink. "Boundaries are love in action." Under it, I added, "especially self-love." Then I picked up my bag and went to a job I'd earned, in a life I'd built, in a body that finally felt like it belonged to me.